Alrighty. And then they came for Deutsche Bank. Now, honestly, I'm not at all surprised by this. I don't know if I had this channel yet, but I mean, Deutsche Bank almost went bankrupt. In fact, in reality, in a market economy, they would have gone bankrupt. Years ago, they were bailed out in a style reminiscent of Credit Suisse, actually. And, you know, we all agree Credit Suisse doesn't exist anymore. It was bailed out. It was forcibly merged with UBS. Well, a similar thing happened with Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank a few years ago. I guess Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank still trade separately, but pretty much they had to pool resources, do a similar thing to UBS and Credit Suisse, and Commerzbank, along with the German government, who forced the whole deal, had to prop up Deutsche Bank and ensure that it didn't collapse. Well, now we are just a few years on from that. I think that was like 2018, so probably before I made this channel. I started this channel early 2019. Deutsche Bank is again on the brink of collapse. The price of Deutsche Bank credit default swaps, not CDs, easy mistake to make. It's the same letters, but you could say CDSs, but I don't. That sounds wrong. Anyway, the cost of insuring against a default of Deutsche Bank is skyrocketing. Now, we're off the lows or off the highs, depending on how you want to look at it. Deutsche Bank is, didn't completely fall off a cliff today. But it's clear that's the next bank up on the chopping block. And they already did the Credit Suisse treatment with Deutsche Bank. So I guess now they could formally merge it with another German bank to try and prop it up. But as we saw, there were problems with what they did with Credit Suisse, as I discussed yesterday, and I didn't even realize. It took me a few days and reading some headlines and found out, oh gee, what they did with Credit Suisse was really screwy. They're completely just rewriting the law and contracts. And that in and of itself is going to create, additional instability. Zero Hedge put up a chart this morning of an ETF that owns that same grade of bond, Swiss bonds, and the same grade that was zeroed out unilaterally by the Swiss government as a part of the UBS Credit Suisse merger. And of course, that ETF is, in the toilet because everyone else got smart and said, hey, if I own any of these kinds of bonds in Switzerland, I'm liable to be screwed over by the Swiss government as well. And Switzerland is just next door to Germany. They speak the same language, in parts. Switzerland speaks like 4 or 5 languages, but, the Germans play a big role. I think that the Germans are conscious of what the Swiss government and the Swiss National Bank did in the case of Credit Suisse, and I would not be shocked to see something similar happen with Deutsche Bank potentially over the weekend, in the same fashion that we saw last week with Credit Suisse. At the end of the week, Credit Suisse, was starting to roll over, and by Sunday, i.e. before the opening bell on Monday, Credit Suisse had been joined at the hip with UBS in a shotgun marriage. Credit Suisse as an independent entity was no more. And so I can only imagine that Deutsche Bank is facing the same fate, which would be, pretty positive, all things considered, for them. Because in reality, Deutsche Bank should be bankrupt, and Deutsche Bank's creditors should take a haircut. The bank is apparently unsound. I don't think, but it's a German bank, so I think I have a little more latitude to criticize Deutsche Bank than I would an American bank. I couldn't, like, if I came out and said, JP Morgan Chase is insolvent, I think that might be a crime in the U.S. We have very strong laws against free speech when it comes to criticizing bankers. And Deutsche Bank, while they do have a U.S. arm, if I'm criticizing the German arm, I'm going to just assume that all my comments, just for the sake of legal liability, none of my comments apply to Deutsche Bank's U.S. subsidiary. And in case any of you were wondering, is it going to be over anytime soon? No. The answer is no. We're going to keep seeing these banks run into trouble one by one, and the government is going to come in and try and just sweep every single one of them under the rug. They're just going to come in and they're going to put a Band-Aid over what is a gaping wound. Because all we see at any given point is whatever bank is in trouble at the moment. You know, a couple weeks ago, it was just Silvergate, and then it was Silicon Valley Bank, and then it was First Republic. And, you know, somehow they've been able to, with duct tape and enough super glue, First Republic has limped along for a couple more weeks. Who knows how long it's going to be around. Maybe you'll end up just getting eaten up by somebody like JP Morgan Chase, and then, we won't have to worry about it anymore. But bank after bank after bank is going to keep running into trouble. The idea that Silicon Valley Bank was a one-off case. It was a crazy, weird circumstance. This crazy Silicon Valley Bank. All of their depositors were tech bros, and the tech bros were having to draw down their deposits because a lot of these tech startups are running into financial trouble themselves, and they didn't hedge their interest rate risk. Oh my God, they're so silly. Those silly Silicon Valley banksters. They were dumb. They were uniquely stupid, the Silicon Valley guys, and that's why SVB went under. It's not because all these banks are running into trouble at the same time. No. We know that's not true now. It wasn't just the tech/crypto aligned banks, which were Silvergate, SVB. Oh my God, I already forgot them, and Signature. We see First Republic, Credit Suisse, already gone, by the way. Credit Suisse is gone. Credit Suisse is not a tech bro centric crypto bank. That's not Credit Suisse at all. It's a ancient financial institution. And now we have Deutsche Bank, the sick man of Europe. And the whole reason why there was such a scare over Deutsche Bank a few years ago, even though at the time no other banks were in trouble, is because Deutsche Bank is massively influential and is a counterparty to pretty much everybody. And so if Deutsche Bank runs into trouble, everyone runs into trouble. Deutsche Bank is a systemically important bank. Unlike Silicon Valley Bank, which was bailed out despite not being systemically important. You could have let Silicon Valley Bank fail, and it would not have had an impact on the broader economy. Those businesses would have just lost their deposits. A lot of those businesses would have gone under. But that would be limited to the tech space. Just like when a local bank goes under, if a bunch of businesses lose money or big depositors, the damage is limited to that local area. They're not a systemically important bank. Whereas if Bank of America goes under, the entire world would collapse. There would be no human civilization left. That's what a systemically important bank is. Now, I don't believe that these systemically important banks should get special treatment. I don't think that they should even exist. But the fact of the matter is that is the system that we have right now. These banks have become synonymous with the Western economy. They've become integrated as true pillars of the Western economy because they have been so entrenched in the power and politics of the West for not decades, but closer to centuries, over a century at the very least. I mean, the lineage of JP Morgan Chase goes back to Alexander Hamilton, I believe, or Aaron Burr. I always forget. I get them confused. I know you're not supposed to get those two guys confused since they were mortal enemies and tried to kill each other. But I forget which one of them started the Bank of the Manhattan Company. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're on death watch for Deutsche Bank. We're going to have to watch to see what happens over the weekend. There was a meeting of some committee on financial oversight or something, or stability. Or I think it was called the Financial Stability Oversight Committee or something. It was something that has Yellen and Powell and a bunch of other bureaucrats. And people were thinking, oh my gosh, is this big meeting? Are they going to announce they're going to backstop all bank deposits in the U.S. 100% to stop future bank runs? People were, because there are calls for that. Because if it's an empty threat, sure, but if the Fed comes out and promises, hey, you don't have to worry about it. If you try and go and get your money out of the bank and the bank doesn't have the money, we'll just cut you a check and don't worry about it. Your deposits are going to be the 100%. And the threat can be empty because if everyone feels that way, well, then no one's going to try and pull their money out of the bank. But I have to give them some credit. They did not do that. They're not coming out and saying, we're going to bail out anybody anywhere. I mean, that would be crazy. You might as well have a 100% reserve banking system, which is what I support, but they're not going to do that. And so if you truly believe in fractional reserve banking, there has to be a risk that when you go to the bank to withdraw your deposit, that your deposit's not there. That is the part of the foundation of fractional reserve banking. If you want 100% deposit insurance, you don't want fractional reserve banking. And so I respect them for having a bit of principle here. But this committee meeting was a total waste of time. All they did was release a statement that says, the banking system continues to remain sound, and your deposits are secure. Whereas earlier in the week, on Wednesday, I told you, based on what Powell said, I got the impression that they would backstop any deposits 100%. So this is underwhelming considering, what Powell said on Wednesday off the cuff. This just seems to be playing things back to, hey, don't look to us for your money if the bank runs out. So we are still very much in the midst of this financial crisis. We're in the beginnings because a lot of the pain has not been felt yet. We're just getting the initial rumblings. The full, the earthquake hasn't really begun. So with that said, I will see folks back here tomorrow, and I think maybe I'll talk about the Adderall shortage that has the white women so up in arms.